All right, on to our second draft guide. I got a comment on the Pistons one saying I should do the Trailblazers. I've been pretty vocal about what I think they should do in the upcoming draft, so I figured what the heck, I'll do this video. I'll get to air out all of my feelings on the situation. I'm also going to take a slightly different direction with this guide. I've already broken down at length all of the players I'm going to be mentioning in this video, so if you're here for purely a breakdown, I will be linking all of my heat check series in their sections. Otherwise, I'm just going to be talking primarily about their fit with Portland. All of that to say, Portland did have some lottery luck. They jumped up to the 3rd overall pick, a really high value asset. And they also have the 43rd pick, which for time purposes, again, I'm not going to be able to dive into, but regardless, they should have a really fun draft night 2023. Starting again with the asset rankings, this is going to be kind of a baseline, simplistic look at their physical assets and who they should prioritize moving forward as far as roster construction. Starting with the untouchables/superstars tier, we obviously have Damian Lillard standing alone in this group, one of the best players in the league currently, and one of the best point guards to ever touch a basketball for that matter. I have massive respect for Dame, and I think he's a microwave scoring, limitless range monster. In my mind, I don't think the Blazers have anybody in that secondary star tier, reserved for guys like Brandon Ingram, Darius Garland, Mikal Bridges, and so on. So we're moving on to tier 3, but I do think Anthony Simons is knocking on the door of that second tier. He took massive strides as a lead guard last season. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA. I think he's a great piece that will command value on the trade market or that you can just hold on to and help you win some games. In the same tier, but more from a projection standpoint, is Shaedon Sharpe. I was admittedly lower on Sharpe coming into the 2022 draft, but he really impressed me in his rookie season, and I see the vision for his role and potential down the line. High flyer, good shooter, he's got a fan in me, and I think he should be front of mind when building this Blazers squad for the future. On to the final tier, guys that I think are positive assets, guys that can help you win or sweeten deals on the market. I have Jusuf Nurkic, who may not be the answer for Portland necessarily, but I still think he adds value elsewhere. All right, so we've taken a look at their roster. They have a bona fide top 10 guy in Damian Lillard. They've got young up-and-comers in Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, and outside of that, they only have a few true win-now pieces floating around. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give my part with Dame spiel really quickly. It's what I genuinely believe the team should do, and then for the rest of the video, I'm going to operate under the assumption that he is staying. Except for one draft option that I don't think they would take if Dame was on the team, but outside of that, I'm not going to be harping on it, I'm not going to be complaining the rest of the video, I'm just going to say my piece and be done with it. Is that fair? First, I have immense respect for Dame. As a writer who covers one of the smallest markets in the NBA and one that has had multiple superstars ask out and eventually leave, I cannot explain to you what Dame's loyalty means from a city perspective. But there is a time when you have to look around and say, we're not going to get there. And I feel Portland is at this point. Simons is great, Sharpe is going to be great, and they have a few pieces. But even by adding a premier player by trading the 3rd pick, Denver and Miami have both proven this year that you need legitimate depth to win a title. And even by grabbing another star, Portland isn't going to have that. Who knows when Portland's going to have this draft asset again, and Lillard's prime is shading towards the back end now. I really do think it's a fair time for both Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers to move on from this era. You both gave it your best multiple times, but it's better for both parties to move on, and that is my Blazers pitch in a nutshell. So moving on, we are going to cover the options that I think they have at the number 3 spot. Really quickly, I do want to throw out, if they do trade this pick, I like Pascal Siakam as an option. I think he has proven he can be the second best player on a contender. If you compare him and Dame, if you can fill out the depth on a team centered around Dame and Siakam, I guess I get that pathway. Still, not what I would do, but I get it. For the purposes of this video, we are going to assume that Victor Wembanyama is off the board, but outside of that, it looks like all the other options could potentially be on the table for Portland at number 3. Let's start with Brandon Miller, what seems to be the most likely option if the Trailblazers actually keep their pick, and if the Charlotte Hornets don't make a massive mistake in passing on Scoot Henderson. Miller at 6'9" was likely the best freshman in all of basketball last season. He's a lengthy sharpshooter with potential on-ball, go-to scoring potential, and enough tools defensively to make him a really intriguing wing pick. Off-ball, he's going to be a tremendous spot-up shooter. He shot near 50% on unguarded catch-and-shoot shots, so if you've got playmakers that can make things happen, he's likely going to knock the shot down. On ball, he's not working with pure burst, athleticism, or speed, but he's got a nice handle, great instincts, and has shown a real feel for the game that most players at 6'9" simply don't have, both from a scoring and passing perspective. In terms of projections, I think he's going to be a really good perimeter-oriented wing in this league, who's likely going to be able to handle tertiary creation and playmaking duties down the line. I don't see him as a number one scoring option, but if he can clean up any defensive or finishing concerns, I think he's going to be a really great secondary or tertiary NBA piece. He's also older for this class. He'll be 20 and a half on draft night, which I don't totally think is a bad thing, especially if you're wanting him to immediately contribute next to Dame. His actual on-court fit with the current iteration of the Blazers is a fine one. Dame has always done a great job of playmaking for others, and having Miller ready and waiting for any driving kicks from him, or even Simons, can be a recipe for success. With Simons being able to handle lead guard duties, I think Portland could do a really good job of managing Miller's on-ball reps without throwing him into the fire immediately or relegating him to a purely off-ball role. The primary issue here being that they're trying to win games, not develop young players. I believe Miller's fit next to Sharp long-term works. They can both space the floor, there's a nice juxtaposition of athleticism. If you could find a legitimate facilitating point guard next to those two who could really be a floor general, that could be a really nice trio. It's just not likely that Dame lasts long enough to see those two into their primes. Bottom line, I think Brandon Miller's going to be a good and versatile basketball player. I don't think you can necessarily go wrong picking him. Because this seems to be a legitimate possibility, with Charlotte allegedly leaning 60-40 on taking Brandon Miller, which, as an aside, I don't believe will actually happen, I'm going to go Scoot Henderson as an option here too. A 6'3" hyper-athletic point guard in the same mold as Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, and Ja Morant, Scoot Henderson dominated the G League at just 17 years old, and while he didn't show a ton of progression in year 2 and battled some lingering issues, he still showed that he oozes superstar potential. Quite honestly, I think he's easily the number 2 pick in this draft. Nothing on Brandon Miller at all. I just simply think Scoot is that kind of talent. His fit with the current Blazers roster obviously doesn't make a ton of sense, with him and Dame both being very ball-dominant guards. But if he's there at 3 and they're planning on keeping the pick, there's not really another option in his stratosphere. The good news, if they were planning on trading the pick and Scoot is at number 3, it drives their asking price up a ton. Touching on some positives, Henderson being mentored by one of the better point guards in the entire league and a longtime face of the franchise would be massive for him as both a player and person. And I think Scoot's fit next to Simons and Sharp makes a lot of sense, especially in terms of his ever-improving facilitating and ability to get paint touches at will. Scoot and Shaedon as an athletic tandem would be nearly unrivaled, and in the least would be extremely fun. In summation, if you're on the clock and Scoot Henderson is an option, just take it. I really don't think you'll regret it. The last player I want to touch on at number 3 is overtime elite point guard Amen Thompson, and this selection only makes sense if you are planning on trading Damian Lillard and resetting your franchise, and if Scoot Henderson is already wearing a Charlotte Hornets hat. I think if the Blazers really are serious about moving into a new era, Thompson makes a lot of sense as your lengthy, astonishingly athletic point guard of the future, especially next to similarly bouncy Shaedon Sharp. Thompson is likely the best passer in the class, maybe the best athlete in the class, and has every tool under the sun to be an NBA superstar with a silly vertical and a 7-foot wingspan. But he is the project to end all projects. He has a wonky jump shot, and there's no guarantee it ever comes around. And at 20 years old, he would be taking a massive talent jump from a relatively unscouted league to the world's best. There are a few teams in the NBA that I situationally trust to develop Amen Thompson into a star, but a Portland team dedicated to patience via a new timeline would make that list. So it's clear that Portland has a lot of different options for draft night 2023, some of which are going to be out of their control via Charlotte. But to me, I think you have to start with superstar Damian Lillard, and I've created a little web graph that I think perfectly encapsulates Portland's options moving forward. Basically, if you have the option to draft Scoot Henderson, do it. I don't care about his on-court fit with Lillard nearly as much as I do about his star potential, which I think is astronomically more than the next best guy. You might have to offload Simons, but you can still run a 2-creator system. If Scoot does go at number 2, which I fully believe is going to happen, then I think you're left with different options depending on what you do with Dame. Brandon Miller is a fine pick next to him, and I think Amen Thompson is an awesome upside swing to kick off a new era. Regardless, I think we're going to get a lot of info and see a lot of fireworks from Portland on draft night 2023. That is it for this one. Let me know what you thought of the video, who you draft for Portland, who you want me to do a guide for next, and we'll see you next time.